I truly was given a gift in being able to see what a virtuous man truly looks like and how he lives and interacts with the world. And I would struggle to come up with something that would be more important for a family than to have a virtuous male presence,
Yeah.
especially a man of God, a man who stands for his faith, no matter what that faith is, but is strong and has deep, deep, profound dedication to his spiritual path. It is life-changing for a family, for a community, for an entire country to have men like that. And on the other side, it is completely life transformative for those same groups to have strong, virtuous women.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Going Out Looking In, the podcast where we're exploring the human experience through conscious conversations. My name is Maxi, I'm your host, and today we're exploring the world of my guest and spiritual teacher, Bridget Boren. Bridget is a spiritual teacher and a speaker who specializes in energy healing, emotional release, and teaching the art of letting go. She's a former Silicon Valley executive who left the corporate world to train with her father, who is also a spiritual teacher, learning the lost art of spiritual healing. The experience so transformed her life that she dedicated the rest of her career now to teaching and aiding others on their spiritual paths. See, she's based in California, where she leads an international spiritual counseling business. And Bridget and myself crossed paths on social media. And as we know, the eyes are the portal to the soul. And it were the eyes that got me to invite Bridget onto the podcast. Her eyes are certainly the portal to the spiritual power that lives within her, and her story, which I then later on found out about, is also another pillar that I really personally resonated with. Transition from a corporate career into a spiritual path, into a healing journey. It first starts with oneself and then sort of alchemizes into helping and aiding others. Very beautiful. So that was sort of like a little bit of the backstory between Bridget and myself. Regarding the episode itself, we touched on a broad variety of topics, as we usually do, right? It was a beautiful sort of like organic flow through all of these topics. We started off with talking a lot about Bridget's personal journey, her learnings from within working in the corporate world, and how that led to the transition. And, you know, I always like to see each pillar of our life, each period, each segment as a teacher, right? And one is not better than the other, right? They're all like foundational and essential and needed, like puzzle pieces in the great creation of life. And without one of them, we wouldn't be the person that we are, right? And gaining the epiphanies that we usually end up receiving if we are committed on the path of seeking. And so I liked to explore that with Bridget. Then we went on to like all sorts of like different modalities of healing, which I really like about her way of like looking at it. It's like spiritual, but then there's like also like physical components, like working with the body, working with energy, working with, you know, physiological sort of side of things, Really nice. And then like holistic health practices, basically, that's what we're talking about. And then we are switching into like the masculine and feminine dynamics. We're talking about masculinity and femininity and a global awakening and a global healing that will be taking place sooner or later, right? And that sort of like great change is also what is really alive within me, just like landing back from a weekend with Richard Rudd from the Gene Keys, where I was spending some time with him and other people of the Gene Keys community for a very sort of like intimate retreat where he talked about, like both the Gene Keys and the different activation, Pearl and Venus sequence, but then also the great change that humanity is facing and the new human, and the sort of fundamental changes within our DNA that will lead to the emerging of a new species. Really, really exciting things happening. So that is really alive within me, and that was sort of like reflected in this conversation with Bridget, amongst so many other things. So I wish you so much fun with that. And before I hit it off, just a small little reminder once again, if you haven't heard, and there will be with every episode new listeners coming in, I am hosting a retreat, a event, an experience. That's what it's called. It's called Going Out Looking in the Experience, and that is a 6-day immersive event happening in Bavaria, in Germany, from September 16th to 21st. At the feet of the Bavarian Alps, at a very, very beautiful, hand-picked, curated location. It's called Matador Lodges. That's the beautiful place where we're going to be gathering with two of my favorite facilitators. That is Shems Hartwell from Hawaii and Chrissy Firemain from Australia. And we're going to be doing really, really important sacred human work, both within men's groups, but also within women's groups. And then we're going to bring it together, right? So that the masculine and the feminine are meeting, able to see themselves more clearly. So this is an event for people who want to explore their own human experience on a very deep level, right? And that includes, the mental plane, the emotional plane, and the spiritual plane, right? So we're going to be working with the body. We're going to be working with your heart and your relationships to the world, to yourself and to others. And we're going to be working with your relationship to the divine, to the ceremonial part of life, to the spiritual part of life, to all of that beautiful, ethereal sort of like components of life. So if that speaks to you, go to goingoutlookin.com now, go to the experience section, and just have a look through, right? Have a look through and read through and see how that sort of resonates. And if it does, book your discovery call with me, one-on-one. We're going to drop in heart to heart, and we're going to just see, if that event, can assist you in whatever you're going through, in any sort of processes that you're in, right? And if it's a match, I'll see you in September. All right. So I wish you, as always, with this episode, much fun and beautiful insights for yourself, with myself, my guest, Bridget Boren. I invite you just to close your eyes for a second and just feel into how it is to be you today, to be human today, with all that encompasses. In Germany, we've just gone through elections. There's a lot of whirlwind of opinions and forces pulling on us. It's just like all drop that for a second and just become aware of this beautiful vessel of the body, the house for a soul, a temporary residency for something that is so much larger that we can grasp now with our senses. And Feel gravity pulling you down on your chair. If you're walking, on your feet. If you're driving, also the driver's seat. And just inviting some lightness, just inviting some joy, clarity, purity, presence, grace. All of these beautiful things just floating around in the ether, just allowing that in, opening. Awakening is a series of softenings, so just soften. We don't need ferocity, we need softening. And with that being said, just taking 3 breaths together. I'm counting that in through the nose and then out through the mouth. So in 3, 2, 1, and in. And out through the mouth. In again, Anali. Out, Skilama. And one more, Anali. And out, Skilama. Beautiful creation on this day. Please facilitate a loving connection between Bridget and myself. Guide our tongues so we can speak what needs to be said, so we can hear what needs to be heard, so we can share what needs to be shared. Guide us through this conversation with grace, respect, integrity, honesty, truthfulness, gratitude towards all of the gifts of life, the sweet nectar that we get to taste every day, the food in our tummies, the roof of our heads, the soil we're standing on. All of these things we're grateful for. And we realize that we are not alone. Those who came before us are here with us, and those who will come after us. May we remember. We thank you, we thank you, we thank you. And with that, inviting you all back into the room, slowly opening the eyes and enjoying that moment of 3D world entering again through the senses. Isn't that beautiful, the light coming in? Yeah, so with that being said, Bridget, on this beautiful day, what's most alive for you today?
That's a wonderful question. Today it feels like a very intense connection with nature, and it's been that way all morning. I had this wonderful walk outdoors with redwoods, and the spring flowers are blossoming, and I think there's such power in paying attention to the actual life that's all around us. And we often say in yoga and meditation classes that our body is a tool to bring us in the present moment. But I sincerely believe that nature is a very similar, if not even more powerful tool to do the exact same. And that if we just take the time to open ourselves up to it, it's so rejuvenating and it's so positive and filled with just life that is very much what I'm feeling right now.
So when you are going on these walks, is there a specific kind of, you do something specific to sort of like really get it in and don't be lost in thought?
There is, yes. So I spent many years learning more about the aura. and the energy field and the energy systems in our body. And so that's something that I play with a lot when I'm out with walks. So it's working on how do we consciously expand out the energy field from the body. And it's really interesting. Many studies have been done on this, and they've found that in the average person, generally speaking, our energy field, if we're not aware of it, we're busy with other things, the aura often only is a few inches off the skin. But you can learn to expand it out to 10 or 20 feet in all directions. And what's really beautiful about that practice is when we expand out in nature, we actually can then sense and pick up on the energy fields of trees and plants, of animals going by. And it's this really powerful experience bringing you back into harmony. And we're just as much a part of nature. It's often easy to forget that in our busy cities and surrounded by skyscrapers and whatnot, but we are just one more piece of nature. And I think that play of how do we sense our energy? And when we do that, that naturally brings us into the present moment. It quiets the thoughts when we're focused on what's happening right here, right now in my body, and in the energy that is radiating off my body. How am I interacting with the world around me? And I found just that simple practice is so powerful. And the people I've taught it to, I've even watched neighbors walking. We have a series of trails near our house. And the folks that I've taught that to, I'll often see them walking with this big smile stretched out over their face. And they're just loving being out on the walk. It's a very nice harmonizing practice when you're in nature.
Right. So can you describe as an example how that will feel when interacting with another energy field of, let's say, an animal or a tree? Is it very subtle? Can it be a, I don't know, a visceral kind of experience? What's the quality of that?
Oh, I like that. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. It's different with each living creature or being. And what's interesting is going back thousands of years, there was often taught through the different spiritual traditions that different plants and different animals carry forth different spiritual qualities or gifts for the world. And just as an example of that, it's commonly taught that oak trees, as an example, are a very powerful spiritual energy. Similar with cypress trees. And not all trees offer that. And so when you're out walking, I'm in California, the land of oak trees. And so when I'm out walking, you can really feel this in your body, a visceral feeling of the strength as you pass by one of these mighty old 200-300-year-old oak trees. And I think when we're more open to the give and take that is always a part of life, if we're open to it, you can really learn to receive but also give. So for an example, out on the walk, you can feel stronger by attuning to the energy of, say, plants or powerful animals around you. But you can also be a conduit of giving too. And that's something that I really focus on is imagine how many thousands of people may have walked past that tree and never paid it any attention. It's a living being and it's never once been acknowledged. And if you can just use the power of your awareness to just for a moment acknowledge it. You don't have to name it. You don't label it. It's not good or bad. Just, I see you. And just a moment. And it's incredible because you can feel an energetic change, which is really fascinating. They even have, in many shamanic traditions, medicine men and shaman have taught that trees and different plants can learn to have favorite humans, which is so funny. We don't often think that way, but they said, oh yes, it's been taught that way for thousands of years, that if there are people who are very kind or gracious or helpful to, say, a tree, that tree can learn to love the person just as much as the person loves it. Similar to, say, a lovely dog in your home and you have an amazing bond. The same can be true out in nature, even in the forest. And that is just a lovely practice when you're out in nature to see, how can I contribute and what can I receive? What's this dynamic in nature between human and other living creatures?
Yeah, I see a few parallels there, from also, I mean, talking about trees, and then it's about talking to humans and people around us and acknowledging and seeing them, you know. Like you say, how many people do we pass? Or how many people sometimes, I don't know, they are just exposed in certain environments where many people naturally are passing them without acknowledging them, and how much of a difference it can make for that person, for one person to stop and like seeing them, right? Like Avatar, right? I see you. It's a pretty deep statement, right? Because I feel like we all want to be seen in some capacity.
And we very much have to go first in everything with life. That if we want to receive love or to be seen, then we go first and we offer that to someone else. And it's not about what your body looks like or your facial features. It's not about signs of wealth or success. It's just, you're alive, so you're valuable.
Yeah.
Yes, you're perfectly good as you are. You were built perfectly for what your role is in the world. And if we could start instilling that simple piece of truth, even to children growing up, say in grade school, you are built perfectly for what your purpose is in the world. And your purpose is different from everyone else's on earth, so you're not meant to be like them. And just that simple statement can reverberate with the truth of it. If you're familiar with the author, Dr. David Hawkins, who wrote about letting go and power versus force, he had this really beautiful example from his own life of that. And growing up, he described himself as a very diminutive man. And it was really bothersome to him. And he said, I was frail, I was shorter than my peers, and it was really upsetting. I didn't understand. I wanted to be this tall, strong, macho man. And it was such an issue for him growing up. And then he began his practice as a psychiatrist and a spiritual teacher. And one day while he was sitting in a room with a patient, and the patient was talking to him, and the patient was explaining how he felt safe. And in this room, for the first time in his life, he could let down his walls and talk honestly with Dr. Hawkins. And in that moment, David Hawkins said, suddenly a light bulb went off and he realized, I was born this way because God knew I was intended to be a spiritual teacher and a psychiatrist, and my job is to make others feel safe. If I was born as this huge mountain of a human, people would feel intimidated and I wouldn't get to be there in a therapeutic and loving way. And in that moment, it all clicked and he realized, I'm perfect as I am. Everything is perfect. This divine design is perfect. And I just wish that more people could see that and understand the truth of that, especially in childhood. That would be life-changing for our world.
Yeah. Yep. So having said that, which is perfect, I just love, I can always trust in these conversations. They just always take us where they need to take us without our active doing, because I would love to explore like your path. And when we're talking about these kind of things and given your background, and it's part of also the reason why I felt resonance with you, because I share, I guess, similar trajectory to the sense of coming from a corporate environment and changing careers entirely. So I can relate. And so I guess putting that in a question is just like opening up a space for you to share a little bit about your childhood and the purpose that you may have been given externally, that was given to you, maybe a narrative that you took on, and how that shifted over time to where you are now?
That's a good question and a very deep one. I had a very alternative childhood, very unusual in many ways. I'm the daughter of a spiritual teacher. My father was a spiritual teacher and a healer, and from my earliest memories, we had other spiritual teachers and sincere spiritual seekers from all over the world flying in to come learn from and be healed by my dad. And he was incredibly advanced as a spiritual teacher, a self-realized man in every sense of the word. And so I very much grew up in the spiritual community and was really learning at his feet throughout my youth. And then, as usually happens, we start pulling away and breaking away from the family traditions in our teenage years, thinking, I'm going to forge my own path. And of course, when we're teenagers, we think we know everything when we know next to nothing. Very much the case for me. And so I really broke away in my teenage years away from the spiritual world. And it was a huge departure in my life. And that kicked off a several year long, very painful journey of trying to live two different worlds. On the exterior, I was very corporate focused, and I was climbing the corporate ladder. I created the external signs of success. Internally, I was miserable, absolutely miserable. And it took years of sincere suffering to really recognize I've made a terrible mistake. What have I done? I've separated myself from the spiritual path. And when it really became so unbearable at one point, I had countless physical health issues from it, chronic pain, but also depression, anxiety, PTSD, very difficult situations to deal with all at once. And I turned to my dad and I said, I'm ready to try again. I need to come back. I need to be healed. And he welcomed me with open arms. And that's when I kicked off 6 years straight of apprenticing with my dad. I went through the spiritual healing process with him and then became his one and only apprentice for many years, learning the art of spiritual healing. And it so transformed my life in every aspect of my life that I decided there was nothing more important. At the time, I was working as an executive in Silicon Valley, and I had what most people thought was a picture-perfect life, and I threw it all away. I turned away from it all. I quit the job. I gave up everything, and I said, there's nothing more important than what I've learned through this healing process. There's nothing on this earth that could be more needed in our world in these times. And when I look out, this information is not being shared. People are lost and suffering by the millions, and there's very little help and hope being given to them that helps address the true spiritual nature of ourselves. And so I gave up the career and everything and launched a business as an international spiritual teacher. And now we have a community of more than 100,000 people in 80 countries who are sincerely working and striving to heal from difficult situations and take up the spiritual path, which has been incredible to see happen. It's just incredible.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Mm-hmm. So when talking about your path in this way and suffering, and as we know, right, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Suffering is something that can be changed, right? Our attitude towards the pain doesn't have to be a suffering one, maybe that's a way of putting it. But in your path specifically, Do you think it was necessary for you to experience what you have experienced to then turn your life around in this way?
Yes. I'm so grateful for the worst things that I've lived through. Now to me, they seem like gems, true gems, because I see now that the experiences I had that were the most challenging and the most painful were just merely gifts to me from the divine. I was in this unique situation, being the daughter of a man who could show me the steps out of suffering. And I sincerely believe that I was given the painful and difficult experiences so that I could learn what it's actually required of you to climb out of suffering. And another way of saying that is climbing out of darkness. And I think that that's a very important aspect of it, as the spiritual path is really, how do we find what darkness or ignorance or lack of light is still in us? And it's the case for every person on earth until we become a completely enlightened being. Just as the term describes, enlightened is a person who has cleansed all of the darkness. They are filled with spiritual light. And so I firmly believe that I encountered darkness at a young age so that I could walk the steps back out into the light and then serve as a guide to show others those steps and get to be living proof that they work. And I can tell you it's not easy. Nothing worthwhile is, but there is nothing that's more valuable or helpful for a human than learning how to live in spiritual light.
Mm. Yeah, it's a profound thing, that asking for help. I'm recently studying like the Gene Keys very deeply, and Richard Rudd, and I really resonate with everything that he's sharing. And I was just today getting into the final stage of a series of teachings, and basically the gist of it was that the moment you acknowledge you need help, it's one of the biggest openings into your path of betterment, of a path to the light. And it's actually a very wise thing, like spiritually a very wise realization, to be asking for help and opening yourself up to anything other than just yourself, right? So you're like widening, you're softening into whatever it is. And that is it's a very wise thing to do that. There's a lot of, there's grace. Yeah, you're inviting grace in, and that's how he shares about it. I think it's just so beautifully put, like the words that he's using. And yeah, I'm also resonating a lot, and I'm identifying also myself with, in the midst of suffering and pain, like it's actually this most counterintuitive thing to like soften, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you actually want to harden, I want to sort of like close off. But yeah, it's like the kintsugi art, right? With the golden cracks, right? Yes. You put it together just even more beautifully. And through that, that's the art of healing, and finding the people who can help you along this path. So, I'm just super curious after hearing what you just shared about your father as well. Like, are you open on sharing a little bit of like, what is it he's doing, and how did he help you from that point of like, hey, Dad, I need your help, to where you are like now?
It was quite a process, I will say that. It was years. We worked together for 6 years straight, 7 days a week for up to 8 hours a day. So it's a process, absolutely. He really was teaching me the art of learning how to take your awareness from your third eye and how to move it from shining out into the world in a place of fight or flight. And we see so many people walking through life in that phase right there. Often they don't recognize it. I myself didn't recognize it in my own life. I thought I was just aware and had quick reflexes. And not the case. I was living in extreme fight or flight. And I see that in the faces of people I pass by everywhere. And how you can view that is that the light of their third eye, out of pain or fear, some kind of cruelty, has turned away from focusing on the soul, and it has flipped, and it shines out at the world, searching for where is the next danger going to come from. And it's perfectly understandable why that would happen, especially as you start getting to know people and know what they've been through. It's very understandable. But it's also a bit counterintuitive in that it's the worst thing that we could do. Because when we take our attention off our soul, that's where all of our intuition, our divine guidance, our blessings, everything is stored within. And so when we take our attention off of that, we're separating ourselves from our true nature. And it creates even more of a divide, a war within. And it makes our problems even worse, which I think goes to the point that you made very accurately, that there's a difference between pain and suffering, and that suffering is largely our reaction to pain. And so that was a lot of the work with my dad, was learning, how do you take your attention, your third eye, and how do you learn how to turn it back inward? And then what do you do when that light starts shining on the things that may be broken, damaged, or dark within? And that is where the healing really kicks off, is what do you do when you find something inside of yourself that is inferior in some way? And there are many examples of that. It could be family curses or generational trauma. Those are very real in our society today. It can be limiting beliefs. It can be darkness picked up from others. It can be inner wounding. There are a whole host of things. But what do you do about it once you come upon them? And what we traditionally see in society today is that we're taught that when we come upon something painful or uncomfortable inside, we distract ourselves. We pull out the cell phone and start scrolling. We turn on TV, we go for a run, oh gosh, listen to loud music, anything to avoid the discomfort. And again, it's understandable. Who wants to feel discomfort? But what's really magical is that the way to actually heal those things is not to turn our attention away. It's not to try to bury them down deeper. It's to face them. And my dad had this term that he used throughout his career, and I just love it. I have not found anything that describes it better. And it's that the gold is in the wound. And you always must go towards the burning fire, not towards the cool pool. Which essentially, go towards what seems difficult, not towards what seems easy. When we go towards and actually face our pain and discomfort and the darkness within, which is in all of us, it can be transmuted into light. And that is the art of shamanic healing, of spiritual healing in traditions all over the world. And that is what I'm now working to carry forth my dad's teachings out into the world and teach that to others. Because I'm living proof it works. And as someone who lived a completely corporate, busy, go-getter, worldly life, I can tell you it works. And it's incredible. It's the art of healing.
Right. So before diving into that a little bit deeper, which I would love to, meaning like what kind of role does the body play, for example, in all of this? And, you know, like spiritual kind of healing sounds potentially, I don't know, for me, at least it would have sounded a couple of years ago, that it's like a thing that doesn't really take place in the sort of like in the grounded sort of like sphere. It's more like a ascension, you know. Oh, actually, we're getting away from here to escape all of that. So I'm curious to explore that a little bit deeper in a second. But what I would love to hear you speak about a little bit, because it's something that that I can feel within myself, is that the old part of my life, when I'm thinking about my corporate time, has informed me greatly in many aspects, and actually has been a substantial sort of like Lego piece in what I'm building now. So I'm actually really grateful for it. I'm curious how your experience with that is, and if there's like things that informed or are still help informing like your path that you're going on now, like going forward now, even if you're like working in a different sort of like environment now. What kind of effect has this old life has had that on your life today?
Well, when I was working in the corporate world, nearly everyone I encountered was deeply wounded in some way and desperately seeking for a path to hide that wounding so that no one would know their vulnerabilities. And if I had to sum up my experience in Silicon Valley, it would be that. It was everywhere I went. It was wounded individuals, psychologically, emotionally, energetically, what have you, from very real difficult experiences, trying desperately to put on masks or internal walls so that the rest of the world would never see their pain. And when we do that, it often causes people to act and behave in somewhat irrational ways. They may have hot tempers, they may lash out at times, and it can be confusing for those around them. What was interesting is when I was working, often my employees, my colleagues, and my clients would pull me aside and say, I don't know why, but I feel I need to get this off my chest. And they would start telling me about their pain. And so we'd often pull them aside into a conference room so they could have some privacy, and they would just begin letting it go for maybe the first time ever. And it was very common in the middle of the day, I'd have employees come crying and hugging me and talking about things they'd been through. And that really was helpful, having that experience, because it's so easy for us to be in the working world and we see how people behave, and it can seem confusing. It's very easy to judge, to condemn, but we're not taking the time to understand why. And that was one of the big pieces of my own path and spiritual training, is learning to not just make an opinion on someone's behavior, but instead train ourselves to view them as, this is completely understandable why they're behaving in such a way. And if I had walked in their shoes, I likely would not be doing as well as they are. And I've been carrying that forward with me, that different outlook on the corporate world, that it's not just about making money. It's not just getting titles. We're still very much interacting with other people who are going on their own path, whether they recognize it or not. And it's not commonly socially acceptable to discuss the spirituality of life at work in the corporate world, although it's such a critical part of our lives. And I found that if you're willing to have just authentic, open conversations with other people, it can be life-changing. I can tell you so many times. One time I had a team come to me, and they were facing a massive legal dispute, and we're talking millions of dollars in legal fees. It was going to be huge. And they were struggling. They viewed the other side, the other company, as their adversary, and they wanted to destroy them, and the adversary wanted to destroy them, and it was just this horrible back and forth. And I talked to them and I said, have you tried praying for them? They said, what? I would never. I said, well, why don't you try? I'll do it as well. Every night this week, let's pray for their well-being. Completely forget yourself. Let's pray for them. These are people who are going through their own challenges too. We don't know what's going on at home for them or in their inner world with their family. We don't know. But we know that it makes sense to them how they're behaving. So why don't we pray for their healing, for their well-being? In 72 hours, the lawsuit got withdrawn. The other side said, I don't know why, but we want to move on. We realize we don't want to fight you anymore. And then to see still people are saying, I don't want to talk about prayer or spirituality. It doesn't have a place in the workforce. So it's one of the most important places to bring it in because it's where individuals come together and what we do impacts the entire world. How businesses are built, our impact on the environment, on the social systems of our world. It's where we need prayer and grace and kindness towards others more than anything. And that really made such an impression on me being in the corporate world in Silicon Valley and seeing just in my own small role in the world how much of an impact bringing in prayer and just empathy, just genuine, we're just humans and treating each other as such. It can be life-changing, not only for that team, but for an entire corporation. It's incredible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you for sharing. It's actually very nice, very beautiful. And to have someone sort of like talk about this who has been in it, has a different sort of weight and energy than, I don't know, reading it in a book. You know, it's really something like a lived experience. And I'm sure you're familiar with Michael Singer and his teachings. Yeah, so he's basically, along with Richard Rudd, my biggest teacher, and I visited him multiple times now and spent time with him, and wonderful man. And he's all about that. I mean, he built a multi-million-dollar empire, you know, and 1,200 employees serving as a CEO. And he is just like, there's actually an audiobook, not many people know that, but there's an audiobook about the untethered soul at work. It's called like that. It's Untethered Soul at Work. And it's literally sort of like applying the teachings of the untethered soul to the workplace. And it's like using, you know, like growing spiritually in the workplace. Like every email, every phone call, every meeting is a potential for spiritual growth. And he elaborates on that like in this audiobook, like in detail. And you know, it's all the same principles obviously as with the untethered soul, but or like with spiritual stuff, but it's very, this is real stuff, you know. And this is also where I feel like with the podcast, oftentimes when I'm actually then when I'm talking to listeners, it's not like spiritual people in the sense of like that they live in a tent and I don't know, burn incense all day long. No, these are like people who are like in the world, you know. They're like going to their job and they have colleagues and they live a sort of like, you know, non-spiritual life on the outside, whatever that, you know, whatever that may mean. But that's where that's where the change needs to happen, I feel, you know. Like if we're all in our silos, you know, doing our things, and then the spiritual life just starts when I'm at home and lighting the candles and everything's just perfectly orchestrated. Well, I mean, you know, actually, no, we need spiritual CEOs. We need spiritual bakers, or like, I don't know, like people at the retail store. I don't know, the cashiers, you know, I don't know. I feel like we can all sort of leverage these teachings and pass them on in this way, right? So that's why I just wanted to emphasize that and hear from you how your experience was with that. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I completely agree. And I really sincerely believe that we're seeing this new level of consciousness being birthed in the world. And that's largely what's driving this spiritual awakening movement that we're seeing globally. And it's not any of us doing it. We are in response to collective consciousness uprising, which is wonderful. And this has happened throughout history. The Enlightenment period was similar in our past. And we are now stepping up, and we are at this opportunity where we can either destroy ourselves or we can take the next step and operate as a world from a higher level of consciousness. And I think a very critical part of that is exactly what you just said, is we are now learning to become more balanced, to bring in our spiritual into the worldly day-to-day, whether you're grocery shopping and walking down the aisles of the market, or you're at work standing in front of a boardroom. You are not separate, and you don't need to split yourself. You can be just as much practicing your spiritual path then as you are when you're on a meditation cushion in your house. Yeah. And I think we're going to see that more and more, and I am thrilled about it.
Right. So, talk to me about your work now. What is it you're doing now, and what practices inform what you're doing now?
Sure. So I have two different things that I'm doing right now. I do one-on-one spiritual counseling with people all over the world. And then I also am launching a spiritual training online school to help individuals all over the world connect with like-minded people and have authentic spiritual training provided in a way to help ground and bolster ourselves as we go through challenging times. And you had this wonderful meditation at the beginning to open our conversation, and you alluded to that. We have so many things going on in our world today, whether it's through politics, through geopolitical conflicts, environmental issues. The list is far too long, longer than anyone I think expected it would be at this day and age. But it has a very real impact on us. And even when we're not aware of how much these outside events influence us, they do. And that is something that I'm working very intensely to teach other people. One, how to be aware of how events in the world, as well as just people passing by you on the street, how they can affect you. How you may feel that you have anxiety one day, but you very well could have simply picked up the energy of anxiety from someone walking by you on the sidewalk. And there are very real steps to clear that out of yourself. Two practices that I teach are both advanced Reiki as well as Qigong. And both are working with energy, just in different forms. And that's something that I teach people a lot, is how do we use these ancient energy practices to clear out what is not us, but it seems like us because it's in our head or in our body. And there are a couple aspects of that. One is what's impacting our thoughts and our beliefs, both about the world and most importantly about ourselves. And then two, what is impacting our physical body. And what's really interesting, they're doing studies now, medical research studies all over the world, Europe, Canada, the US, and I believe Singapore have been on the forefront of this. Even Dr. Gabor Mate referenced this many times in his latest book. They're doing many studies now linking repressed emotions or reactions to past traumatic events to specific illnesses and injuries in the body. And that's something that I experienced in my own life. I was dealing with chronic pain, and it was completely confusing to the doctors I saw. They saw nothing wrong with my body, but I was in stabbing pain. And it was through learning about repressed emotions and the emotions and energy that we can pick up from others, learning about that and learning how to clear it out, all of the pain went away immediately in my life. And so now getting to be in a platform where I teach these skills and these techniques for clearing and releasing to others has been incredible. I actually just had someone reach out to me, and they've been in chronic, debilitating pain in their legs for 10 years. No treatment has worked. They practiced just one technique that I taught them, and they did it every single day for 30 days. All the pain is gone. In just 30 days, something they've lived with for a decade. And it's incredible. It's so powerful that it's shocking to me that we're not taught this earlier in life more commonly. But I think, again, this is part of this awakening consciousness that we're seeing, that what we experience and interact with in the world influences us more than we often know. But there is a path to clearing it out and healing. And that's what I'm teaching people now.
Right. So on a meta perspective, on a larger perspective, what happens? Like, why would you say, why is there so much suffering? And yeah, why are we where we are right now to a large degree? Mm-hmm. And with what you were just talking about, and also like alluding to what you've shared regarding the third eye thing and turning that more inwards, I'm trying to sort of like get like what happens within me when sort of like, for example, working with you or like using these techniques, what happens with me, right? Like what changes so that I can experience what you just talked about, right? Like these quote unquote, like miraculous things happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a great question. The first part of your question, why we're here where we are now, can be summed up in one sentence. We have forgotten integrity. Collectively, all over the world, we have strayed from integrity. And largely, integrity is about living in truth and love. And our societies all over the world, we have largely betrayed that. And we have been guided down a path of seeking pleasure and comfort and success while we let go of that strong adherence and dedication to the truth. That no matter what, even if the entire world pointed and laughed and told us we were wrong, if we were living for the truth, we would still stand for it no matter what. And we've begun elevating the opinions of others over the opinion of God. And so when we live in integrity, we realize that whatever happens around me is just a reflection of what's going on in those people. It's not a reflection of me. I live in integrity by just saying my only responsibility is to live for truth and love, to follow my soul's path. Let everyone else do what they're going to do. Now that sounds simple, but it's not practiced in our world to any large degree. But I sincerely think that that is changing, and that more and more people are turning back, as I did in my own life. They're turning back to truth and love, and to the path of integrity. Now, how that relates to this healing process is actually really interesting. When we aren't willing to look at or admit our own mistakes, the ways that we have been hurtful to ourselves as well as to others, we cloud ourselves. Many cultures call it the veils of ignorance, and it's like a veil goes over our third eye, and it makes us less intuitive, it makes us confused and easily betrayed by others. That's a consequence of living outside of integrity. When we can start being willing to simply look at and admit what we have done, that no one is perfect, no one is without mistakes, and you don't deserve judgment or condemnation because you've made mistakes. There's a beautiful quote that every saint is just a sinner who hasn't quit. And it's so true that we're not meant to be perfect. We're not meant to be without fault. We're meant to keep trying to do better. And much of the healing process, for example, these healing miracles with chronic pain and whatnot that we're seeing, people doing energy work. They're learning how to face what's been buried deep inside of them. And when we face old painful reactions or emotions or whatnot that we didn't feel capable of facing back then, so we swallow them, they actually go somewhere physical in the body and they fester. It's energy, it's alive. So let's say that you had furious rage towards something or someone in your life at some point, but you weren't in a setting where it felt safe or socially acceptable to express that rage, so you swallowed it. That goes somewhere in the body, and it sits and it festers. Something that I often teach people is that the joints are very commonly used because they're sort of like hiding spots in the body energetically. When you look at, say, doing a bicep curl, you're focused on the muscle, and the muscle gets worked, but you don't focus so much on the elbow. It's often forgotten, and most of our joints are forgotten. We don't put a lot of attention in them, and there's not as much movement unless you're consciously practicing yoga or Tai Chi, one of these. And so the joints are often used to store those old painful reactions and emotions. And so the path that I teach people is, how do we develop the courage to start facing those things that are stored in us and letting them go? And the process of letting go is beautiful. It's a wonderful process, but it all comes down to integrity. We have to be willing to face the truth.
I like that. Yeah, integrity. That's an important one. And what you just shared with the joints, I have horrible pain in my wrist, and let me tell you, so I can attribute that, and I can trace that back to a specific incident when I was doing martial arts my whole life, and especially boxing, and so I was working on a sandbag, and then I hit it in the wrong way, and I'm pretty certain that sort of initiated some sort of pain. Now I have a relationship to this thing, to this pain, right? I have a relationship to this area of my body, to my right wrist, that I have to use all the time. And this relationship grew over time. So it started with the physical aspect, obviously, and the physical layer. And now I'm asking different questions to my wrist. So obviously I'm carrying a lot with this hand. I'm right-handed, so I'm carrying a lot. What is it that is too heavy for me to carry? Oftentimes I'm tense with that thing. It's just I don't know, even at night when I'm waking up in the morning, I feel like I've just held squeezed a ball or something like that for the whole night, and it's all tight. So I feel like there is, and I'm gonna get to a question eventually. I feel like there's just a whole different dimension to illnesses in our systems than we are most commonly aware of. The questions that we should be asking ourselves should be different and should be expanded way beyond just the physical things, or the directly visible things. And what I said earlier, this is a live process that I'm undergoing right now. It's this softening. Mm-hmm. It's just a softening, and the softening into the pain, what you said. And yes, I can connect that to integrity, because I want to know in this life many things. Partly why I'm sitting here, I guess. I just want to know, and I'm just curious, and I'm open, and I want to find out, and it has something to do with integrity to the degree of also facing sometimes adversity, or asking difficult questions, or not to the people on the podcast as much as I do it to myself, and these shadow patterns of humanity that live. I don't know, I'm German, so obviously there's a shit ton of generational stuff happening, as we know, from 2 world wars that go in my lineage. I can feel that. And as you say, you know, this energy just doesn't vaporize. It just doesn't go, I don't know, it's stored somewhere. And anyone who is somewhat sensitive and has visited Berlin will know, for example, just as an example, right? That energy it does not go away, especially not when worked on it in a conscious way. And it hasn't, in my opinion, in, for example, Berlin. But anyway, long story short, what I'm saying is, and that's my question to you, is like, so I'm having these pains, I'm having these illnesses, I'm having these ailments. So like, why should anyone even consider like implementing a spiritual component in the healing journey, right? I hear this a million times. I have my own answer to this, but I would love to hear yours. Like, why isn't the normal doctor, quote unquote, like, why shouldn't that be enough? Or why should I even consider sort of like bringing spirituality into the picture here?
That's a great question. It reminds me of a saying from Paramahansa Yogananda. And he gave this great analogy. He said, if someone passes away, and I promise I'm not connecting that to your wrist, don't worry, but if someone passes away, we know the things that are required for a human to stay alive, the very core needs. We need oxygen, water, food, and to some degree sunlight, right? But if someone passes away, can we put their body out in the sun and put water and food into it and oxygen all around and they'll come back to life? Of course not. We know that. We know that everywhere. So then you have to ask, well, then what is keeping that body alive? If it's not those things that we say that we need, what is it? Of course, it's the soul. That's who we really are. That's what we carry into each journey in different bodies through reincarnation. That's who we really are, our personality, our essence, everything. And anything that people talk about with regards to spirituality simply means that we are focused on the soulful aspect of the individual. And that seems so obvious, but there are so many branches of spirituality that I hear from people often. It can be a bit confusing. And what do people mean when they're talking about all of this spirituality stuff? And if you had to boil it down, we're just saying the soul. We're focused on the soul, the true you. And when we look at these healing practices, that's what we're doing, is we're looking at how do we incorporate the physical with the soulful aspect of it, the energetic aspect of it. Now, if going to a traditional Western doctor solves all your problems, wonderful. That's fantastic. I hope it does. For many people, it doesn't. It didn't for me. And I say that with complete utmost respect towards Western medical professionals. I worked in medicine for years. I have total respect and admiration for what they do. But I also know that in medical training, which is what I worked in, we give no training to the providers on the soulful or energetic aspect. And it's such an important component of who we are. I mean, they can even measure the electricity in our bodies. And so when we look at healing a condition, it's often a journey of healing. We try different things to see what works for us. And in that process, we get to know ourselves better as well. We understand what's actually causing our issues. And that's why I feel people can benefit from investigating this spiritual and energetic form of healing. It may not work for everyone, and that's just fine. But for those who feel drawn towards it, it can be so powerful because you're truly approaching the truth of who you are. And there's so much in life that affects us on an energetic and emotional level. And it's it's mind-blowing. It will open you up to completely new realms of life when you begin studying those. And there are simple things I teach people all the time just to be able to feel the energy in their body, the electricity. You can do something as simple as rubbing your fingernails together. And you do that for about 30 seconds and then feel your hands, and you will feel the energy radiating down through your fingers, because we actually have these small energy meridians on the tips of each finger. And when you rub, you open them back up and you can feel it's just powerful energy coursing through your hands. So there's simple things that we can do to test, and it can be so helpful for people to begin getting to know themselves on a deeper level, both for your physical health as well as for your mental health.
Yeah, totally. Something comes to heart and mind. There is a Netflix documentary. It's called The Universe, or just Universe, or Our Universe, something along the lines. Morgan Freeman is like narrating it. It's beautifully made. It looks very nice. Point is, for anyone who doesn't, it tells the story of the origin of the universe, the known universe, right? And also then it goes into the planetary constellations and ultimately planet Earth. And it uses one animal at a time per episode to talk about a phenomena of our known universe. So one episode, for example, would be gravity, right? And then there's they use turtles, yeah? The sea turtles, as an example to talk about gravity, because they obviously have a built-in system, some sort of something, right? Let's leave it up to the mystery here, that tells them where they have to swim to, right? They just know. So they fight their way, right, from the beach out of the egg into the water. Many of them unfortunately die, right, on the way to the water. But once they make it in, they start swimming, and they just swim. They just swim and swim and swim and swim. And they have these built-in systems that work with the gravitational field. So that's then what they elaborate on a little bit there. And the point that I'm getting towards is everything's energy in our solar system, at least. Mm-hmm. And that documentary, just I don't know, I looked at that thing and it's just everything, I don't know, animals, plants, humans, we just have different sort of ways of working with the energy that stems from the sun, right? We just use it in a different way and metabolize it in a different way. Sometimes a more direct way than other times, right? Sometimes we have to eat something that actually consumed a lot of energy through light, and then it sort of nourishes us. But at the end of the day, the source is always the same. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was one of the most spiritual things I've ever seen, without one word about God or some saints or anything. No, it's just the origin of where we come from, and how that is explained. So that's just as a side note. And what I wanted to dive into a little bit also here is, so when I'm having these physical ailments, how does and I've seen in your videos that you're working with the body, right? It's not a separate thing, right? Mm-hmm. So how do these, let's say, more ethereal or etheric or spiritual maybe, or energetic kind of approaches, how do they actually go hand in hand with sort of palpable physiological movements and things? How do they complement each other? That's what I'm asking, basically, right? Because they're not separate from each other, as far as I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. They all go hand in hand. When we're doing this energy work, it's important to realize that the latest info I've heard is it's about 4,000 years that this has been taught. around the world, predominantly in Asia, but around the world, different traditions. And that is this practice of moving energy through the body. And when we are just laying down, if you've ever been sick in bed for days and you don't move much, the energy gets very low and the energy pools in our body and becomes very stagnant. And you compare that to going out for a fast run through nature and your energy is pulsating through your body and you feel incredible and your cheeks are red from the cold air and you just feel wonderful. The energy is flowing miraculously through you. Well, what facilitates that is our energy meridians, the channels, the pathways that flow. And these have been mapped through the body for thousands of years and studied extensively, especially in traditional Chinese medicine. So we have these energy flows moving throughout our body. And when we have injuries or pain or something in our body, these are often attributed to energy blocked somewhere. So we'll use the wrist as an example in your case. Something happened to block the energy flow there. And when the energy is blocked long enough, it often causes pain. Now, the symptoms can be different in each person, but we want to figure out what is the cause of that blockage, right? Because if we just unblock it, there are movements and there are ways to do that. There are many different treatments that do that. But if we haven't gotten to the underlying cause, it's just going to block right back up again as soon as we leave the office or the treatment center, wherever you are.
Yeah.
And we can begin bringing in that awareness of how the energy flows through our body into all of our daily movements and practices. It's very powerful when you're working out. If you're out exercising, yoga, lifting weights, if you can bring conscious awareness and take the music out of the earbuds and instead just be in silence and feel the energy flowing through your body as you do different movements, you'll actually often become aware of places in the body where it feels stuck. You can't really, there's something weird there. My spine's not really moving in that one spot. What is that? You're becoming aware of an energetic knot. And the feeling can be a bit different in each person. We're all unique. But it's incredible how bringing these practices can help us not only live better, but we even move better. We flow better through life. And what's interesting also is as we do that, as energy flows more successfully through us, we then radiate out stronger, healthier, happier energy. And then others get near us and they said, I don't know what's happening, but I want whatever you have. Tell me what I have to do. I want to flow well too. And often when you first sit them down and explain, well, okay, great. We need to get your energy flowing more successfully through your energy channels. They go, no, you misunderstood me. I just want to feel good. And I said, yes, I know. These are the steps to do so. And it's just incredible what learning how to move energy consciously through the body will do. It'll change everything in your life for the better.
Right. So what would you say, what are some things, so I'm thinking about the paths of yoga right now, and I'm thinking sort of like the ways that get us to yoga, to the union, to the eternal everything, right? To the merger from the separate consciousness to the universal, right? And so I'm thinking about like, okay, so there is like the cognitive sort of like I know things, right? And that knowledge helps me to ascend and to evolve. I would love for you to share a little bit about sort of like from a holistic health perspective, right? Like what would you recommend us doing on different sort of layers to strengthen our health? And I'm assuming it's not just the physical, right? After what we just talked about. Yeah.
Sure. Well, walking is very good. I'm not going to say it's just walking. There are several different things that can be life transformative for our health, both physical and mental health. I would say the first is developing a practice of prayer. And that can look completely different for every person. You don't have to be part of any one religion or ideology. You don't even have to use the word God if that makes you uncomfortable, but develop some kind of prayer. And there's a science to praying. There's studies being done upon the impact of it. But it comes down to we are admitting that we are not just dependent on the thinking mind, the ego, and we are opening ourselves up to help from life universally. That takes tremendous humility to begin asking for life to guide us instead of the ego to guide us. And it is in line with the spiritual laws of the world. And we're not often taught that there are actually spiritual rules, and that when we break them, we face the consequences of it. And no big horns go off warning when you've broken a spiritual law. Often it's a slow, gentle slide down in consciousness, in health, in energy, all of these things. We are meant to live in union with the divine. Each of us can be thought of as a pore on the body of God. We're not separate. We are a piece. And so we're meant to come back into union with that truth. So any kind of prayer, and I have people from all over the world reach out saying that they had a very painful early introduction to religion or faith, and they're not sure if they're praying correctly. I would say to all of these people, just pray in the language of your own heart. The universe, the divine, God, whatever word you use, knows you. They know every hair on your head. They know what's in your heart. They know what you're struggling with. You don't have to worry about doing it right. Just try. Just start. It will evolve and grow. And that is very important for the health. The next part is learning how to do some kind of energy activation in the body. And this again goes hand in hand with learning to live in union with the laws of the world. And so there's many different practices for moving energy through the body. Yoga is a wonderful one as long as it's practiced consciously. If we go to a yoga class simply because we want to have a great physique and look good, we're missing the point, right? But when we instead are mindful and present in our yoga practice and focused on feeling and working with the energy in our body, your practice can completely transform for the better. I personally practice Qigong. I practice yoga and Qigong, but Qigong is my just favorite practice. I have seen incredible results and healing through practicing it. I do it every day. Tai Chi is another wonderful one. These are just incredible. And the third piece of it that I think is really important, outside of the usual healthy food and exercise, those are kind of a given and very important on the spiritual path, but is learning how to do some kind of conscious self-care. And that doesn't mean drawing yourself a bubble bath. Like conscious self-care is actually a bit different, and some people use the practice of Reiki, but some way where you are taking just a few minutes each day to get still, silent, and tune into your body with the energy of love. Our bodies are meant to live in a state of love, and they thrive being loved. You can activate your brain power and your cognitive functioning by sending love into the brain. You can strengthen and heal your liver by sending love into the liver. It is incredible. In your case, I would recommend spending a few minutes every day sending love into that wrist. And it can be a very sweet practice of activating your hands and then just holding that wrist, and you can even hold it close to your heart, and just send love in and visualize that love from your heart center going into the skin, into the tendons, all the way into the bone marrow, and then out the other side, and just thanking it and loving it. And you will feel it begin to pulse and vibrate and come alive. And that simple act can be enough to start opening up energy blockages. It's incredible. So I think those three practices are so helpful and necessary, especially in the times that we're living in.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I agree. And quick side note to that wrist thing, I did a holotropic breathwork session while traveling just a couple of months ago in Guatemala. And this thing, like, holy shit, like like it's normal that you get these chicken hands, right? Like these sort of like, you get like stiff hands. But man, it's sort of like manifested in my wrist like crazy. I thought like it's exploding, literally. And I could it's just like the most intense pain, like I don't know, like a rusty sort of like a screw that is just like incredibly tight, and it's sort of like already rusty. And like I felt like I finally, I don't know, I don't know, that just came to me that I had held on too strong, all this time. I had tensed up all this time too much. And and then the right side for the masculine as well, and then I think about my father and my grandfather, and how they lived their lives, and my career, and like my sort of like what I'm initiating in my life, sort of like when I'm tuning into my masculine side. And then I'm just like, no, I need to soften into that, and that, yeah, it just ties into what you've shared, like this like conscious way of relating to this part of my body, and to also, like you said, just ask the divine for help. Like really, I'm just like, please, just, I'm coming before you, just naked and vulnerable, and just like, just take me where you need to take me, and it's very, it's good stuff. It's important.
Very, very important. And you brought up a good point about that, about honoring your masculinity. And that's such an important part, is balancing that masculine and feminine. It's a dance within each of us. And that can also be a really important piece that can lead to disharmony in the body in different ways when we are leaning too hard into one side or the other, instead of honoring that we're all meant to have both. And it's perfect. It's wonderful.
Well, I mean, you would know all about it working as an executive, and being like initiating things and being proactive and doing. I guess that's, I don't know, I would intuitively associate that with sort of like more masculine energetics, whereas I'm like, I don't know, like, to be honest, like also why I invited you on is because I feel like there's, and then I read about your story afterwards, right? So I see that there is a lot more, there's a level of like receiving, and sort of like this, like softening and like letting things in, and still being now successful in a different part of your life, right? And then a different career. So that just shows that it's both possible. It's actually needed both, right? The receiving and then the like taking aligned action. Well, I don't know. What do you feel about that?
I completely agree. I think that's, in my personal opinion, the lack of balance between masculine and feminine is one of the largest and most serious afflictions in our world today. That we are not taught how to really live in balance, and it spirals out farther than that. I think we're seeing, from a spiritual and energetic aspect, men are very rarely being taught what healthy, strong masculinity looks like, and instead they're being shown just Hollywood movies and whatnot, right? But what is a strong, powerful man of faith and virtue and vision? How does he behave in this world? But what is his feminine side as well? And why is that just as important? And how does a man interact that way? How does he show his feminine side, which can be nurturing and healing and loving? It can be also very protective. I mean, we all know there's nothing like a mother grizzly bear. You'll never find anything more protective. So there is this beautiful dance of honoring that in ourselves. And the same goes for women, that we're not often anymore shown what virtuous femininity looks like. How in this world, in our modern age, do you actually conduct yourself as a virtuous woman of the divine? And it doesn't mean that you are just all feminine all the time. You must honor the male side of yourself as well. And it looks different in men and women, how that balance manifests in their life. But being able to have, like you said, a balance of giving and receiving, of taking charge and taking action, having a vision for where you want to go and the conviction to get there, but also being willing to nurture, to keep your heart open, to feel deep, profound empathy with others when you see them going through hard times, and to show yourself grace and patience when you make a mistake instead of being ruthless or hard with yourself. And there's being able to live in balance between masculine and feminine and not shut ourselves off from one or the other is so important. And that's what I'm hoping with more of these teachings and the online school. I'm hoping more and more people can learn how to live in balance, because it'll change your life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have such deep empathy so I work with men mostly. I have so deep empathy towards the crises of masculinity and manhood, and so many men never having someone like a masculine role model, no one to show them all of these things that you were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for women, that I don't know, in my work does not play as big of a role, but still I can see it in the world, and I obviously, yes, I interact with that side of humanity to the degree of that there's nothing more that I wish for the women in the world to be able to, and I know it's a big ask after everything that happens, but to trust and to soften, mm-hmm. and to deepen, and for us men to welcome that in and to create containers where that is, safely allowed to express itself, right? I would love to see that on a larger scale, but we're working on that as we speak. That's happening.
It's a global effort.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. And it takes time. All of these things take time. I understand that. So I would, after everything that you've shared also with your father, and now talking about masculine, feminine, and the role of women and men in our world, I guess, the father and the mother are our energies in our life that shape us greatly. How would you describe the relationship with your father now, after everything that you and him were doing together and have been through together?
Oh, incredible. He's my best friend in the world. And my favorite person on earth. And I'm so grateful for that, because I truly was given a gift in being able to see what a virtuous man truly looks like and how he lives and interacts with the world. And I would struggle to come up with something that would be more important for a family than to have a virtuous male presence.
Yeah.
especially a man of God, a man who stands for his faith, no matter what that faith is, but is strong and has deep, deep, profound dedication to his spiritual path. It is life-changing for a family, for a community, for an entire country to have men like that. And on the other side, it is completely life-transformative for those same groups to have strong, virtuous women. I mean, throughout history, women have been the glue of communities. They've been the nurturing, the education, the healing. And you cannot have one without the other. And so that I'm so grateful for that example in my dad and getting to see that in action. And now I have this just overwhelming appreciation for the spiritual gifts in men. And I hope sincerely that more and more men are taught and find their way to teachers who can teach them what is beautiful and wonderful inside men. And I hope the same for women. There are just incredible gifts, and it's such an honor to get to be one or the other. It's a gift. And you have a very real responsibility and a contribution to make to the world. And when we can get off of focusing on what we get from the world, what we get from life, and instead we turn our attention to what was I built to give, your life will change. Things just start flowing because you are living with the flow of life. We're meant to be living in service to each other, to aiding the world, not to accumulating great clothes. And so it's just having the dad that I did gave me just the deepest respect and appreciation for genuine, virtuous masculinity. It's such a beautiful aspect of our life.
Yeah. Yeah. So beautiful. I mean, it's just, it warms my heart, and it's just a testimony for just what you've said. And on the flip side, it's the testimony for the work that lies ahead of us as a society now that more and more of these role models fall away and are not present in the way that they, in my opinion, have been in the past. Also with the further sort of destruction of the family model as we know it, and that narrative and the discreditation of the family in that capacity, which can and should be, I guess, like a foundational piece of maturing, and a pillar for to fall back on, especially when you're just freshly walking this path of life, right? It's just incredible what that can offer a young soul in guidance and stability. Mm-hmm. So, I'm seeing men who, I don't know, they're just bitter, and so are women, and they're fed up with the men, understandably so, they're fed up with immature masculinity, whatever that sort of it relies upon, I don't know, Hollywood movies or whatnot, it's not right. It's not the initiated manhood that you and I are speaking about. So, it's needed, and what it can do for women as well. I wanna say that as well. Mm-hmm. It's so healing, right, to be in the presence of a man who is exuding that energy. It's healing. It's healing generational wounds of mistreating the feminine, of one man who is showing up in a different way for them, seeing them with the eyes of a healthy masculine energy. It's powerful.
It is, I agree. And it goes back to the divine connection that both men and women, or masculinity and feminine, have. And that masculinity is the connection to Heavenly Father, which is the light of truth and honesty in this world. And femininity is our connection to Divine Mother, which is the love and the nurturing and the healing. And you need them in concert together. To be able to heal something, you have to be able to shine light and see what it is you're healing. To be able to create anything in this world, you have to be able to have a vision and the conviction to follow through on it to be able to create. And we see that's a dance between feminine and masculine, between Heavenly Father and Divine Mother. There are countless names for it. And I think you brought up a great point, and it's something that we're seeing globally, is that we have the immature or undeveloped masculine. We have the exact same on the feminine side, a very immature, undeveloped feminine as well. And really the global issue that I feel we're facing is individuals are no longer taught how to grow up. And it seems simple, but it's actually an affliction plaguing our entire world. We're no longer walked through the steps and the very real processes of maturation. This is why throughout history, so many cultures around the world had ceremonies, some kind of important events to markate when you have hit different points. It's critical for us to have that. We must honor the psychological, emotional, and physical changes that we go through. And those ceremonies, those rituals are critical in life. Without them, well, we look around to see what happens. We see millions and millions that never made it into adulthood. They're wounded children walking in adult bodies. And it's not a condemnation of them. It's very understandable. And I myself lived that way for years. So I have a lot of empathy for where they're at. And now we can begin the process of, as a society, learning how to bring forth these ancient rituals and practices for growing up. How do we start maturing both the masculine and the feminine side of ourselves so that we can really participate in life? And when you look at it, children are all about receiving. They must be. They need to receive to be able to grow and learn. But when we get stopped in our growth, our development, and we are immature, we get stuck in the receptive mode. We just want to get. Whereas an adult is about giving. An adult is about service. An adult recognizes their gifts and their contributions, and they give them to the world, knowing that that's the only true way to live. So I think it's going to be wonderful as we see our world relearning the process of maturation, and we start seeing collectively millions of people turn from getting into giving. That's what we need.
Yeah. So for the women listening, from like your own path and learnings, what kind of advice would you give someone, a woman who, let's say, is in a masculine, like dominated environment where receiving seems, I guess, the most counterintuitive thing to do, where, I don't know, everything screams to tense up and to be rigid and hard and strict and all of these things that we see? What advice would you give to those?
I love that. There's a very important aspect of femininity there is a big aspect of receiving, absolutely. But there's a big aspect of giving, in that one of the powerhouses and greatest gifts of a woman is her heart. There's nothing that can compare to the love and nurturing that can come from the heart of a mature, virtuous, good woman. And it's what our society, our world is screaming out for more love. And when women are placed in situations that are very masculine, and maybe they're rigid, they're tense, they're tough, they're competitive, I understand what you're saying. I completely agree that the natural inclination is to wall off our heart, and we harden. And we think, I must assimilate. I must become like my environment. So to any women listening, I would suggest don't try to become like men. You are built the way you are for a reason, and it's perfect. And one of the greatest things that you can do is to be a bearer of love where you go. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to start being overly emotional, or you don't have to cross boundaries, nothing of the sort. It's a silent act. But where you go, you are loving towards yourself. You are tuning into your heart every single day. When I worked in the corporate world, every morning, even when I was traveling for work, I would spend a few minutes just sitting on the floor of my hotel room doing a heart opening exercise every single day. And every evening when I came home from my meetings, I would do the same, a heart opening. And I just kept reminding myself, I have to live with my heart. I must. This is my superpower. And it's the case for all women. Try your best to lean into your heart. Keep that heart open. There are many practices, there are many great gifts, and there's books, and there's so much wisdom available if you'll only seek it out on how to tune into your heart. That will help get you farther than nearly anything.
Yeah. Thank you. It's incredibly attractive as well for a man. Let me just say that, like, it's actually the most beautiful thing to see, like, and like there's a big difference here. It's not weakness. It's actually a sign of incredible strength, which is incredibly. It's radiating. Like a woman who does that. I'm thinking of my ex-partner here. She just had this thing, like, I don't know, she was, and like we both were maturing in our paths, and then I don't know, towards the end of the relationship, and then I don't know, we you know, there was a parting ways, but like there was a stage in our growth where she was so tuned into like my energy that like I don't know, she had the most like intuitive, sharp, like razor sharp kind of intuition and way of like delivering that with what you said, like an open heart, and then like very few words, very gentle, very thing, and boom, and placed it with me like, damn, just like, and that is like a quality that, like you said, that's like the medicine of the feminine. It's incredible. Like it's this like divine touch that cuts through the whole facade, right? And it's just like, tsak, it just like goes in right there where it needs to. It's hard to describe, but like it's a beautiful thing when witnessing that as a man, because it gets you to shut up like real quick, because you know she's right, you know, and then out of that grows like tremendous respect for the feminine. Wow, like, because there's so many things that like with, and I don't know, that's how I work oftentimes. I'm such a cognitive like based person, but all of that is useless against like the infinite sort of like wisdom of the feminine. Like when she's like tuned into it and then she's delivering something like that, you just know, oh my God, like I have not been seeing this, like how, you know, but I was just, you know, too much up here, you know. And that's where she then comes from, this space, and just like tuned into the divine wisdom. And yeah,
that's amazing that you got to experience that. That's wonderful.
I know that though. I know that very much. Yeah.
And it's true. It's true. And we need them both together. If we live only in the body, well, then we're missing out on our cognitive faculties. And so the masculine and feminine, it's a beautiful dance between the two.
Exactly. Yeah. So, landing the plane of this conversation slowly and steadily, what are you looking forward to?
On a big scale, I am looking forward to more people coming out of suffering. And it's that self-created suffering. And learning, I see it already happening all over the world. There are millions of people who are beginning to ask, why did this happen to me? And that is a turning point. When you can start opening yourself up to realizing that the things that happen to you in your life are for a reason, they're there to teach you something, and they are a gift. And when you can start learning what the lesson is in your experiences, that's how you transmute pain into gratitude. And that is how you heal. That is how you rise up with wisdom. And I see that happening. We're at this beautiful stage all over the world of people beginning to turn and ask, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? And we are going to see this global wave of awakening, of forgiveness, and of healing. And I am just on the edge of my seat, giddy, watching it happen.
Beautiful. What are you proud of?
That's a good question. I'm proud of not having given up during the most difficult parts of my training. And there were parts that they were close to breaking me. And my dad told me that some points where they broke almost every person that he had worked with in the past. They were just so difficult. And by the grace of God, I stuck with it. I've had a very stubborn personality throughout my life, and I tried to channel it towards that. I said, I will not give up. And at the time, it was very confusing, and I didn't understand what was happening. And now, having somewhat popped out on the other side, I'm very grateful for that. And proud, I suppose, would be a word. I'm glad that I didn't give up, and I hope that for everyone else. Don't give up on your lessons.
And
it's good to take that in our own lives, to start realizing the truth of that. We can't give up no matter where we are. We're where we're meant to be. We are where we're supposed to be. And if you don't like where you are right now, it just means that there's a lesson that you need to learn. And if you can get busy trying to understand what the lesson is, and just stick with it. Know that it's always in your best interest. Something in this is helping you get better. That's a great attitude to get you through life.
Absolutely. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you. I've loved this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so do I. I wish you so much like expansion and joy on your path. It's just, it never ceases to amaze me how these things work out on the podcast and technology, and it's just, it's interesting. It's inspiring. It's exciting of just how quickly, I can go from seeing something on social media to having a genuine conversation with someone. Not yet in the flesh, that may come, I don't know, at some point in time when we're not limited by the physical form anymore. But as long as we are, it's actually a really, really fascinating thing. And I'm grateful for this exchange with you.
Thank you. I am too. And I appreciate you having this space for people to come and share their experiences and bring about some curiosity and awareness. It's wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. It's the biggest school of my life, just imagine having a space where you can just ask all the questions that, you want to know from the people that most of the time, you find inspiring, and you're like, I actually want to speak to you,
Mm-hmm.
It's great. Okay, well, is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you feel like that needs to be said, or that you want to share?
The only thing that I would add in is we covered so many different practices and so many different things that people can do. And I would say start small, but start today. If there's anything that you can do, whether it's adding in a prayer today, maybe trying a yoga video on YouTube for free, but start today. Try something today that you feel drawn towards and just stick with it. See how it can benefit you, but start today.
All right. You heard it, people. Start today. Hey, beautiful listener, you have made it all the way through. And I want to take a moment to say thank you. And you can do me an enormous favor. It's all I'm going to ever ask from you. And that is to go to your podcast app right now. And if you enjoyed the episode, give the podcast a 5-star rating. If you want to write 1-2 words or sentences, even more powerful, even better. Thank you already in advance. And also, while you're at it, just click on that follow button, on that bell notification, so that you never miss a new episode. All of that just contributes, and it helps me to increase the reach of the podcast. That means I can attract bigger guests, and that means I can deliver more powerful episodes. So it's a tiny thing. I'm only gonna ask this little favor of you ever, not more. 10-15 seconds of your time, a couple of clicks, that's it. Makes a huge difference for me as a creator. So thank you so much.